Hello, I'm Deborah VanAmerongen, and I am the Deputy Practice Group Leader at Nixon Peabody's Affordable Housing and Real Estate Practice. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Susan Connelly, the Chief Operating Officer and Principal at Housing Opportunities Unlimited.
Hi, Deborah. I'm excited to be here.
Housing Opportunities Unlimited is a housing relocation consultant that advises clients regarding compliance with Uniform Relocation Act requirements, otherwise known as the URA. Our Nixon Peabody Affordable Housing team often works with Susan and HOU when URA is triggered. So some of our audience probably doesn't know what the URA is. The full name is the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Act, but all of us call it the URA. So could you just talk about what the URA is and what its main objectives are?
Sure. So the URA and its complementary implementing guidelines, Handbook 1378, outline the requirements that developers who are working on site with existing residents that are currently using a number of public resources, financing resources, and or are going to use, ensures the proper and supportive treatment of residents during the rehabilitation or the one-to-one replacement of public and affordable housing.
So could you give us an example in the HUD world when URA would apply?
Sure. So if, for example, people are using RAD as one of the most often used resources to rehabilitate public housing right now, URA comes into play in two ways. One, the RAD regulations reference URA, and two, if your project needs residents to move off-site, then all of the URA regulations apply. So it's both the intent of certain subsections of URA and the whole application, depending on where residents are being relocated and for how long. If residents are being relocated for over a year, there's additional rules and responsibilities of the owner, as well as additional rights for residents. In less than a year, there's a series of notifications and support that developers need to provide for residents.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about the difference between temporary and permanent relocation.
Right.
So let's say an owner of a property is participating in a program. They realize they're going to have to do relocation. When do they need to start thinking about compliance with URA? What are some of the first things they have to do? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how it's different if it's temporary relocation versus permanent.
Sure. So recently, June 3rd, there were some changes made to URA that kind of brought the treatment of temporary, so people who are going to be displaced for a year or less, closer to treating them like permanent relocated people who would be out of their homes for a year or more. And that includes identifying a specific apartment 90 days prior to the start of that individual's move. And that's really difficult, especially on a temporary side. So we really want to come in early so we can help developers and housing authorities think through the implications of all of this and prepare their relocation plan to reflect not just the regulations, but their reality of how much of that they can actually get done. And if they can't, how we can advocate with HUD about kind of the either fiscal or other realities that are happening on the site.
So we've mentioned one of the key factors that has to be taken into account is resident notification. So let's start with that. What's one of the first things that owners have to do in terms of providing notification to residents?
So it depends on, again, the sources of financing that the project is taking advantage of. So it's the sources of financing that can trigger certain notice requirements. So a notification of eligibility goes out very early in the process if you know that somebody is going to be, say, for instance, over income for the new program that you're bringing in. And so that's a notice that needs to go out very early. There are notices under different programs, just telling, even before you've finished your making your deal with, if you're purchasing a property or you're in a process and you're the housing authority of procuring a developer, you have to notify residents that you're considering this option as a financing, a new financing plan. So there's that level. And then once you have closed and you're moving forward, you start with a 90-day notice to all residents, letting them know when their estimated move date will be and what the implications of that are and what support they can expect to get from your relocation agent.
And the other really important part of the URA, in my experience, are the benefits that residents are entitled to. So in addition to being notified about the potential to have to move or actual when they have to move, they also are entitled to some benefits to assist them through that process. Can you give a high-level overview of that?
Sure. Yeah. The overall goal of URA is to limit the impact, especially the fiscal impact on residents of this change in financing and potentially a change of the condition of their apartment. The URA requires developers to ensure that they're provided with, assistance. All their moving costs are covered. If there are costs related to utilities and a change of address, those are covered. If a resident needs to be relocated off the site, so getting their kids to school changes and they don't have transportation, providing that or ensuring they have transportation to schools for their kids and their regular activities. There's a whole host of things that HUD has identified to ensure that residents aren't incurring the cost of having the project done.
So why is aside from wanting to be treat residents of a property well, why is URA compliance important? What could happen if an owner doesn't do the things that they're required to do under the URA?
For owners, the scariest thing is it opens up the project to a lawsuit from residents, and it gives residents legal standing to bring a lawsuit. So if URA has not been followed, there is a reason that a resident can get an attorney and go to court because they weren't properly notified. They don't think they were treated appropriately during the process. And then the other side of that is having HUD realize that you haven't followed the rules and you're using public money that usually comes through HUD. And they can insert themselves in the process in a way that I think most people want to avoid.
Yeah, and I've heard that the funds could actually be subject to recapture, worst case scenario, if you didn't follow these rules. Yeah, so really important to be in compliance. So we're recording this in early April 2025. New administration took office in January. I don't think any substantive policy changes have come about yet, or many at all, let alone related to URA. But any thoughts on where this administration might go?
So I think no matter what happens, I think most developers will recognize the need to have some form of URA as part of their continuing process, especially when you're working in states with the highest real estate values that often have, at a local level, resident protections that again, protect and align or with URA. So I think it'll always be useful whether it's required or not.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. These insights have been really helpful.
Thanks, Deborah. It was great to be here.